we identified that tenderness was important to consumers, that we had variation in tenderness, where that variation came from, what was contributing to it biochemically through the work with calpains and calpistatins. And then the animal genetics people took that information and developed genetic markers.
Welcome to the Beef Podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Buzzard, and it's my pleasure to bring you the latest trends and issues from the best and brightest minds in the beef industry. Today, we are joined by Dr. Rhonda Miller, Professor, AgriLife Research Fellow, and AMSA Meat Science Fellow in the Department of Animal Science at Texas A&M University. Dr. Miller earned her Bachelor's of Science degree in Agriculture Journalism, a Master of Science, and a Ph.D. in Animal Science Meat Science from Colorado State University. She conducted her dissertation research at the Roman L. Hruska U.S. Meat Animal Research Center in Clay Center, Nebraska. I'm really excited to talk to her today with a great conversation about beef consumption, consumer trends, and meat science. So with that, we're going to dive right in. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Miller. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much, Brandy, for having me on and giving me this opportunity to talk to the beef industry, which is, as you can probably guess, like many of the viewers, dearest to my heart.
Absolutely. We have that in common, that it's both very, very close and near and dear to both of our heart. I'm really looking forward to talking about consumer trends and beef research and things like that. That's one of the things I'm passionate about. So I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of the things that you have to say. You've been at A&M for 37 years.
Yes. Yeah. And I have to tell you the most important thing this last summer, the American Meat Science Association named me their R.C. Pollock Award winner. That's the highest honor they give. I'm the first female.
Congratulations.
And yeah, thank you. And I mean, that was like, whoa. When they called and told me, I think I cried for 2 weeks.
It's a big deal.
It was a big deal. I never thought I would ever achieve that level of respect, I think, from my peers. And so then that made me reflect, it's been a good career. I really have always felt that, but I understand now that I really have been able to impact the industry, whether that's through my teaching program or through my research or through my work with like NCBA and other organizations, Texas Beef Council, for example. I have to talk about them too. And to help the industry. So I'm grateful for all of that.
I just, you were speaking about the award, and again, congratulations, because not only to earn an award of that stature, but also to be the first woman, like that is a big deal in and of itself. If it's been, I don't know how long the award has been in standing, but to be the first woman ever, that is a big deal. And I don't remember, I think it was Lee Bork with Progressive Beef who told me a long time ago that like, he never worried about winning. And I'm not implying that you are worried about winning awards. What you said just reminded me of that he had said, he's like, I just have tried to do my best every day and better the industry and not ever thought about those things. And the awards have just happened. And, that's not verbatim what he said, but it's similar to your story. I feel like you have just poured yourself into your work with passion, and it's easy to see that you have loved it and have loved whether you're in academia or industry, and you've just truly had such a joyful time working. And then it's wonderful for me to see, as someone who is like not, is earlier in my career than you, it's wonderful to see that progression of like loving your career and working towards it, and then at the end. And so I think that, congratulations, and that's really an inspiration.
And I agree with your comment, because actually the president of AMSA at that time, Dr. Tommy Wheeler, I was at Clay Center working with them with their panel, and he mentioned, well, are you going to be at RMC? And I told him, well, maybe 1 day or 2 days. And he said, well, wonder if you get R.C. Pollock. And I said, I am never getting R.C. Pollock. I have no qualms. That's not something that I sit and aspire to. I mean, I'd love to. It would be incredible, but it's not, I didn't think it was attainable. So that it was a true surprise. And I appreciate the confidence that my colleagues put in me that I'd made contributions. So fun stuff.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, while we're on the topic of your career, you've been working in meat science for, as you said, like, let's see, if you were in industry for 4 years and you have this career, so like over 40 years, 44 decades. And you mentioned about all the changes. I would love to know, based on your research with, your work with Texas Beef Council and your research with the checkoff, like, what, in your opinion, is the top priority for consumers now? And has that changed during your career?
So I'm going to start with the last part first. Has it changed during my career? Yes. And one of the things that we knew in the 80s, we started the beef tenderness survey in 1989 to measure tenderness of beef and to understand the variability in it. Because when we went to the consumer and some of that first research, which was a national retail beef study that was done in the mid 80s, said that variation in tenderness was the biggest driver of consumer liking. So we said, well, okay, tenderness is important. And then we said, well, where are our tenderness problems? What is our variation? What do we need to fix? Nice, big overall and arching goal. So we did the beef tenderness survey, and I moved from Colorado to Texas, and I found out that cattle with ears and humps weren't rodeo stock, but beef cows, right? So that's good, and I understand after I went through my first summer why you need Bos indicus influence. But remember, I worked for somebody who was a feedlot operator and a packer, and I knew the price differential between those cattle. Bos indicus influence cattle versus, we'll just call them beef breeds, Bos taurus. And we found in the first tenderness survey, a little bit hard to take, that Bos indicus influence cattle were tougher. Now, what percent Bos indicus came along through that time as well. And when we looked at the regional effect, cattle from the south were more variable in tenderness. Didn't mean that everything was tougher, but more variable and overall a little bit tougher. And that gave us direction. And that's when a lot of researchers, not necessarily me, but I contributed a little bit, started looking at what were those causes and started looking at, are there sire lines within Bos indicus, mainly Brahman, that are more tender or produce progeny that are more tender or have a greater opportunity of being more tender. And that also drove some of the genetic work to look at genetic markers for tenderness. And Clay Center was very involved in that. We had researchers here that were involved. There were a number of people who contributed to that. But I think that was exciting work because not only was it supported through the beef checkoff, but it helped to give the industry some viable tools. We identified that tenderness was important to consumers, that we had variation in tenderness, where that variation came from, what was contributing to it biochemically through the work with calpains and calpistatins. And then the animal genetics people took that information and developed genetic markers. And then I had the opportunity to work with American Brahman Breeders Association, where Dr. Jim Sanders, who was here as an animal breeding and genetics professor, was working with them. And we were able to look at the 16 top sires in the Brahman breed and understand not only tenderness and variation in tenderness in their progeny, but also look at the biochemical measures of what were driving some of those tenderness differences. And one of the days in my professional life as a young scientist during this time, I'll never forget. I It was a turning point because we had the American Brahmin Breeders Association Executive Committee and other key members here at A&M, and I was giving them the talk on tenderness and factors that affect tenderness and everything. And then the question came up, are Brahmin influenced cattle tougher than Bos-Taurus cattle? And I'm sitting there, I'm a young scientist. These are the kings of the beef industry, right? And I'll never forget it. Richard Ferguson was sitting there, and I looked at him and I said, do you want me to give you the politically correct answer or the truth? And he said, I think we're ready to hear the truth. And I said, yeah, you have a problem, and you have sires that are tender and you have sires that are not tender, and you need to figure that out. And that was a great day. And then the next time that I can say was another turning point was the first time the King Ranch. I did work with the King Ranch as well, when Paul Janot was there. A lot of respect for him and the subsequent people that have been there. But I did the work to develop to give them the information for them to develop EPDs for their sires, and they had their first sale, and they had tenderness EPDs, and there was some relationship to price and value of those bulls at the end.
That's wonderful.
It was, yeah, and that was when I went, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we continued to do the beef tenderness surveys every 5 years. And one thing that we've been able to see through time is that we have improved tenderness of beef and we've reduced variation. And that tells me the EPDs, the genetic markers, they've helped. The industry has really addressed those. So then about 2008, it's like, okay, now what am I going to do?
And taken care of. So now what?
Yeah, that's good, but consumers we still have some demand issues. And what are some of the drivers of liking for consumers? And so we did some work. And while if tenderness is acceptable, which we know it predominantly is, not always, but predominantly is, then, and juiciness kind of goes with tenderness, then flavor. And as we've changed generations, as the millennials have come on, and now the Gen X's, they're X's, right? Or are they Z's, Gen Z's?
I don't know.
The ones younger than millennials. Can I say that?
I think there might be more than one that's younger than millennials.
Yeah, there's two of them in there. I think the X's and Z's.
I'm barely a millennial, so I don't know. I'm like the oldest end of millennial, so I don't know what comes afterwards.
Yeah, and my twins are the youngest part of millennials, so I just pay attention to them. But we started seeing that flavor was more important. And so then we developed the beef flavor lexicon, and that was funded by the Beef Checkoff through NCBA. And we started doing some work where we looked at factors that influence flavor and what aspects of flavor are important to consumers. And we developed the lexicon in basically 2010, 2011, and then NCBA formed the beef flavor subcommittee. And we're still in place today. And what that has enabled us to do is not only use my ideas, but these other very smart researchers across different universities, and put together a game plan that has successively addressed issues related to flavor. And the first thing we did was describe what were the drivers of flavor. Because, see, the problem with flavor is there are over 35 different attributes of flavor. Flavor isn't just one thing.
Oh,
Think about,
yeah.
when you eat beef, it tastes different and there are different attributes. Where tenderness is mainly muscle fiber tenderness. We do shear force. Juiciness is how juicy it is. Very simple attributes. Well, not simple to measure, but single attributes.
Right. Yes.
And all of a sudden we have 35, and we can have them when we smell it and we can have it when we eat it. So we started saying, oh, if we have all these attributes, what are the most important ones? But also, importantly, what are the negative ones? What attributes, if it's present, people eat the beef and say, well, I don't like that. We wanted them to always have the flavor that they said, oh, I love this, right? Well, yeah, but we also know based on flavor research with other commodities and things that people vary a lot in their perceptions. We have different acuity for flavor. And also, what are some of the drivers of liking? An example of this would be, I'll just use myself. Okay, I grew up in northeastern Colorado, and fall is important to me because of football and pheasant season and pumpkin.
Yeah.
And I love pumpkin. Now, do I love pumpkin because I like the taste? But I also like the emotions associated with it. I like pumpkin because it reminds me of fall. It reminds me of football. It reminds me we didn't really celebrate Thanksgiving. We celebrated the opening of pheasant season. That's where all the family got together, right? And pheasant is one of my favorite meats. So see, that's all tied up in pumpkin.
Yeah.
But other people don't really like pumpkin pie or pumpkin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry for them. But
people. I am a big pumpkin lover.
Are you? See, yeah. I think pumpkin lovers are important. So that's a little bit of a problem because when you have all these attributes, you also have variability in what people like. And there are other things such as emotions that are involved because the olfactory bulb, which measures flavor, the nerve from the olfactory bulb goes to the same place in the brain where your emotions are. That's why flavor and aromatics are associated with emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, us as humans, it's like, well, hey, the happy part of my brain is we don't say it like this, but what's happening is the happy part sparking. Oh, I'm happy. Oh, I like this. Or, oh boy, it smells putrid like rotten egg. Oh. My emotions tell me, get away from that. That'll make you sick, right? So it's a little bit more complicated. And what we have found through that work, number of consumer studies, is that consumers may not know that they're eating fat, but when meat has more chemical lipid, marbling, consumers say, oh, I like this meat.
That. Delicious.
Yeah. And in fact, there are a couple of studies, and I tell this story when I'm presenting data, fat-like, which is the flavor of fat. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go get Haagen-Dazs ice cream and some Halo. Halo is a non-ice cream product, right? Eat both of those, and the fat flavor in Haagen-Dazs is so dreamy. Okay, so and I use that as a reference actually with my panelists, but people like that. They don't know it's fat flavor always. Some do, some don't. But they know that is a very positive flavor, and it is the biggest driver of overall life. Makes sense. Look at the premium programs for Top Choice certified Angus beef. Look at the increase in percent prime. look at where we have been in our industry. Not only have we improved tenderness, but we have also improved marbling as we went along.
Yes. Yeah.
I never thought that I would sit there and talk to a packer and they would have 80% choice in their cooler,
That's amazing.
85 some days. I know.
Yeah.
10% prime. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Select is the one that's hard to find. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we have addressed that, and that's good. We also know that grilled light flavors, brown, roasted, umami, those are important flavors. In other words, the flavor that's unique to beef, people like. And we have conducted this work where we've used trained panelists to tell us what's there. Then we've gone to consumers and we brought them in and we fed them. And then we've even sent product home and let them cook it the way they want to. And then we've even sat down one-on-one and talked to them after they've eaten the product. And the one thing that we can tell, no matter how we measure it, is that people who eat beef like that beefy flavor. We call it beef ID, umami, brown roasted. Okay? Yeah. And if it has too much liver in it, or too much metallic, then, or too much rancid oxidative, we call it cardboardy. Put cardboard in your mouth, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they don't like it. Now, they may not describe it that way, but they say there's something wrong with it. And if they are medium, well, degree of doneness eaters, then they really like brown roasted. And if there's any bloody, serumy, metallic, they don't like it.
They're out on that.
Yeah. But if they're rare, medium rare eaters, it needs to have some bloody serumy. Oh. And a little bit of metallic and a little bit of liver, because those things go along with it. So we identified that. And the one thing that we've been able to do with that research then is to help really the food service industry more so understand how to improve flavor, grow flavor and fat.
There you go. 2 things.
Yeah. And we've worked on work looking at different cuts. We do know that when you go across cuts in the carcass, some of those cuts are going to have higher connective tissue. They're also going to taste different. And so, what can we do using cooking methods to improve their flavor to make them more acceptable? That's some of the work that we have done. So, basically, we cook a lot of beef, many different ways, feed it to a lot of people, and have a lot of fun with it and really find out what's important. But what's interesting, and this is kind of one of my final points with all this, is that when you sit down and talk to consumers and you give them a steak they like, and we'd usually give them up to 8 steaks. So in that, they have a steak they like and a steak that they didn't like, and you have them pull those out. And you sit down one-on-one and talk to them. And you say, well, which steak did you like the most? Oh, it's number 8, or whatever the number was. And you say, well, why did you like it? Notice neutral question. And almost all of them will say, it was tender, juicy, and I liked the taste, or I liked the flavor. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Well, let's talk about the flavor. What was it about the flavor that you liked? It was tender, juicy, and I liked the flavor. Oh, good. Well, good. I really appreciate that. But could you expand on the flavor? What was there something in the flavor? And then they kind of look at you like, lady, I already said it's tender, juicy, and flavorful. And we have found that now because we've kind of solved that tenderness issue, we still have some variability there. Don't think that that's totally gone away. But flavor is over here more driving for liking. Tenderness and juiciness are right up there together. They're very highly related and they're close. So if we get any of those things out of whack, they get closer to that overall like. But flavor is a huge thing. And if you think about consumers today, they experiment with cooking. They may not cook, but they go out and eat different flavor profiles. They're interested in food. We have more foodies. We have more shows and YouTube videos to watch, right?
There's a lot of stuff out there to consume in terms of videos. Yeah. So I meat judged one time when I was in high school, and I did not enjoy being in the cooler for several hours. So I never meat judged again. But my husband did it and loved it, and took several advanced meat science classes when he was in grad school. And so there was a lot of flavor profile things. We were at Kansas A&M University and the meat lab, things like that. And I never got chosen to do one of the flavor profiles where you got to eat a bunch of steak. But so we've been talking about, you've been talking about some of this research with tenderness and flavor and things like that. But what about ground beef? What about, do consumers like the same flavor and texture attributes with ground beef as they do from your research where they're, I'm assuming, getting, little bites of steak to determine a lot of or roast or what have you. So does that translate to ground beef?
So it's a very good question, Brandy. It does in some aspects. There's some other complicating factors with ground beef. We use different lean sources. So the amount of chemical lipid, you can go to the store and get extra lean. You can get 95% lean. You can get 90. You can get 85. You can get 80% lean. You can get 73% lean. That lean, that amount of fat, certainly drives flavor. But then you can get chuck ground beef. You can get sirloin. You can get round, right?
Yeah.
And so we've done a lot of work with ground beef where we looked at different texture measurements, brine size, different lean sources. And we found that they want some fat with their ground beef in general. And that they like brown roasted. Umami.
Mommy, yes.
And fat, like they're the same drivers. And some of those negative drivers were the same. So that was good. And then through the beef checkoff, we did what we called a industry flavor assessment. And we actually published that work where we went to a number of different cities and collected ground beef in different retail stores. So it represented the majority. And we decided to do ground chuck, commodity, just regular commodity, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Ground sirloin and ground round. And we kept those at a constant fat content as much as possible.
Right.
And what we found is that, and this is the thing that we've said to people forever and ever. Ground chuck has been shown to be liked the most. Well, guess what? Ground chuck is liked the most. Because the fatty acid profile of chuck is different than the fatty acid profile of the round. Also, the round has those cuts that are a little bit higher in myoglobin, have more serumy, bloody, metallic, liver-like flavor, and they pick them up.
Yeah.
And now, they don't, again, consumers, there are only a very few consumers that you talk to, they'll sit there and talk about those attributes.
Yeah.
But most of them are, it tasted good. I like this one better.
It tastes goofy.
Yeah. And so lean source is really important.
Mhm.
And depending, of course, on the market, the lean source going into commodity ground beef can vary a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But
For sure.
yeah, they like fat. They like a little bit of fat. They don't like too much fat. When I say too much, is the 2773 commodity is okay, but they like the 80% lean ground chuck a little bit more. Isn't that
Okay.
funny?
Yeah, a little,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
I
yeah, and I think it has enough fat in it, and then it has that milder beef flavor. The beefy, remember I said beef ID comes out
yeah,
more in that product. Yeah.
I'm a little I'm not discrediting the research. I'm a little surprised by that. Because I personally I think about a chuck or a round roast, and then I think about a sirloin steak, and like I think of a sirloin as, for me, if a medium rare sirloin is really really good. Like if I can't have a ribeye, a sirloin is the next kind of steak.
So see, you like that bloody sirloin with a little bit of liver and metallic in it.
I don't like it well done, and so maybe that's why I'm not leaning towards the roast side of it. Because when I make, my husband and my children love the roasts that I make. They just adore them, and I'm like, you guys can have that, and I will eat something. I will make it for them, and then I will eat something else because I just don't love I don't love a roast, but I do love sirloin, and a lot of people will knock sirloin steak because it's, that's the steak you get at an Applebee's. It's like a lower cost cut, but I really like sirloin. I think sirloin has a wonderful flavor. So I've learned why I like, sitting here talking to you, I've learned about that. So that's been really interesting.
A great point because my husband is like you, and I every once in a while I need some burnt ends. I tend to eat my steaks medium rare, and I like that. But when I do a roast, I I want it to be brown roasted, probably because that's how I grew up. But not everybody does.
You liked it to have a sear. You like it to be seared a little bit before, like on the outside. Yeah, yeah. And I don't make it that way. But my kid, they just love it, which makes me feel good. I'm glad they like
That's
it.
right.
But
Yeah, that's right.
my husband, every once in a while, will be like, "Are you sure? Should we save him leftovers for you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm good. I'm happy you like it."
Yeah. One of the things that we've found out with all the consumer work we've done is we've done some consumer segmentation. And this isn't what you normally think of from a marketing standpoint, but we are we've worked with millennials and non-millennials, heavy beef eaters, light beef eaters, every combination. And within those, there are people that I'm going to call I call the discerning. Okay. They are very critical. They're critical. They have a perception. And if they have something they don't like, they trash it. Right. But if it's what they like, they really tell you about it. And then there are those opposite that if you just give them beef, they like everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're just beef lovers of everything.
Yeah. They're just beef lovers. And then there are two groups in the middle, and they are just separated a little bit, but they they're kind of more moderate in between. They will discern differences, but not to the same extent. So the discerning consumers are the hardest to please, right? Those non-discerning, you just give them beef; it doesn't matter. And then the two in the middle, you have to be a little bit concerned. You have to try to meet their needs. And sometimes we don't realize that about our consumers, that they're not all the same. They don't all have the same drivers. And and so, as we how do we increase their satisfaction. Probably a little differently. And I don't have any answers on how we do that, other than I know what things are really important to them. Because within each of those, then there are the really well done and medium rare eaters. So you can kind of think of that.
So where do you see consumer preferences going in the next decade or maybe beyond? You know, I know you're still going to be tuned into it. So do you see flavor being the main driver supported by texture 10 years from now, or do you think it's something else?
So some of the work that I've done that hasn't been through the beef checkoff, but through Meeting Place, the magazine, as we developed some of these ideas, and is a combination of texture and flavor. And so well, I've always talked about tenderness. Now I said the word texture, right? Because
a whole other barrel of monkeys open.
Yes. And so one of my former students owns a company, and she works with the food industry, all the major food industry, and she helps them understand their consumers and what's important. And they have found that texture is a big driver as well. So, but the problem with texture is that we aren't as conscious of our texture preferences.
Some of us are not. Some of us, me raising my hand, are very aware of the
Yeah,
texture.
that's right. And you're going to figure out what you are here in a minute, because I think I already know. So flavor is important, but this subconscious driver of texture also plays a part. And so what is that? Well, we found out through work with foods that consumers are basically fall into 4 mouth behaviors that relate to how they perceive texture. Now, they don't know this, because when we work with these groups, they'll always come together and say, "Oh, there are other people like me." And it's like, oh, okay. So there are people who put food in their mouth and like to chew with their molars, but they still respond a little differently. Some are crunchers and some are chewers. Crunchers want to hear crunch, crunch, and then they swallow. They are fast eaters. You may know people like this.
Yes,
right?
I do.
And
I know one.
Yeah.
I live with one.
You do? Okay. And we get crunchers together, and do you know they have discussions about who has the best ice to crunch? I couldn't believe it. And Sonic is supposed to be the most preferred.
I'm not a crunch person, I don't think, but Sonic does have the best ice.
Yeah. So you learn these things. So think about that in relationship to putting beef in your mouth. Chewers like to chew. They are people who chew gum. They are the largest category, and they are also sometimes the most conflicted. Gummy bears are their favorite candy. I'm a chewer. I put ice cream in my mouth and I chew it.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm not a chewer.
But see, sometimes chewers you're a chewer, but you're kind of flowed into some of the other things. Okay. And we've done lots of work with chewers. We've given them ground beef, and we've given them steaks, and we've even given them pork chops. And I'll never forget, this one lady said, "I thought I was the only one in the world that chewed ice cream instead of chocolate." It's like, and then I went, "Do I chew ice cream?" And I do. I chew yogurt. I put it in my mouth and it's smooth and I chew it. But okay. So I'm a chewer. The other two categories use their front teeth and their tongue to manipulate food in their mouth. And they are suckers and smushers. So my daughter's a smusher. So she puts things in her mouth and she uses her tongue and she smashes them around. So she hates things like cherry pie.
Oh no.
Or any pie that has a solid face and a softer face, because when she goes to smush it, ugh. I mean, rice pudding, she hates rice pudding. Not because of flavor, but because I'm going to put that in my mouth and do that with it, right?
Yeah.
And
so fascinating. I love
yeah.
So interesting.
Suckers are also they manipulate in their mouth, but they like to hold things in their mouth and suck the flavor out of it. One of my graduate students was a classic sucker. So we're on a research trip. She has crunchy Cheetos. Okay, I'm a chewer. I want the crunchy Cheetos and I want to chew it. The crunchers are over there going crunch, swallow, crunch, swallow. She's sitting there sucking the cheese flavor off of the Cheeto. I'm like, but it's getting soft. She's like, well, that's what I want. And then she smushes it in her mouth. Okay. So we did some work to find out if we do that with other food and we aren't that conscious of it. Does it have an effect on how we perceive beef and ground beef?
Yeah.
And it does. Different things are important. So it isn't just tenderness. And so you said you like top sirloin. Okay, sirloin's not the most tender cut. Sometimes it's tender, sometimes it's not. Top sirloin steaks are more variable. And no, I do think you're probably a chewer if you like top sirloin steak.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't want it to be like, I don't want a well done top sirloin. I was sitting here thinking, do you know if there's any correlation to taste buds of, we're going to go off, like we could talk for another hour about this, but of another a correlation between crunchers and the strength of their taste buds or like their olfactory system? Like how good are my supposition, I guess, based on the one cruncher that I live with, is that like my husband doesn't taste or smell food very well. Like those are just not very strong senses. And so my supposition is that he crunches because he can't taste stuff really that well anyway. I don't have anything to support that hypothesis other than the 10 minutes we've talked about this. But
well, I can tell you that you've hit on a very important topic in the sensory world, and that is we do have different acuity for the basic taste buds in our mouth and also our olfactory bulb. And some people have more receptors or sense other things.
It's time for our famous three.
Give your cattle platinum protection with Virbac's new Bovagen Platinum vaccines. These 4 vaccines deliver quality protection against respiratory and reproductive diseases in the vaccine combinations you need to protect cattle at every life stage. Bovagen Platinum vaccines are comprehensive and safe, have consistent supply made in the United States, and are backed by a 6-month guarantee in the Bovagen Platinum Protection Program. Start your platinum protection at us.virbac.com/platinum protection or contact your Virbac representative.
You know, Dr. Miller, you've gone through this description of like all these different kinds of mouth feels and textures and the way people chew and there's smushers and things like that. And I just find like that's way more than I ever knew about, you know, taste panels and the way people consume and their preferences and things like that. And I don't know, you're welcome to, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, but I think that it's a testament to just the versatility of beef, that whether, you know, I had sirloin last night, so I love a flavorful sirloin, but there's also super tender cuts like a filet, and there's and I don't really like tough cuts. I want them to be tender and flavorful. So it's usually a very, very rare sirloin, but, or medium rare, closer to rare. But anyway, like, I just think that speaks to the versatility of beef, that there's a preferred cut anywhere on the carcass for people, whether they're smushers or they like, tenderness or flavor. I think that's just really speaks to the versatility of beef.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Brandy. And that's been some of the real fun part of all this is that, beef isn't one thing. I think I can say this on a beef podcast. I think chicken is one thing, right? And we have that diversity. And as we understand our consumers more, that gives us more opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, beef is not just one thing. I mean, beef fits every cuisine and ethnicity in terms of like their favorite, their foods of what their special foods, nostalgic foods. It can be seasoned or prepared in a way that meets like almost everybody's flavor preferences. There's the different tenders. I mean, that's a wonderful statement there, is that it's not just one thing, it's many things to many different people. Like there's a lot of cuts that come off the carcass that we don't eat, like, are not in high demand here in the United States, but there are other nationalities and countries that love those cuts. And so that's a wonderful statement, I think, is that beef is not just one thing. Sadly, very, very, very sadly, that is all the questions and time that we have for today and this episode of the Beef Podcast. But I hope that you will come back on the show again, because I would love to talk to you again. Thank you so much for joining us. If listeners have any questions for you today or want to find out more about your work or anything like that, I know that you're retiring soon, but if they want to find out anything, where can they do that?
The best way is through email at rmiller@tamu.edu. I think I get to keep that email, and at least they told me. Yeah, and if not, that's probably the best way to contact me.
Okay, I put that in our show notes for our listeners who might be driving and want to look at it later. So I did put Dr. Miller's email address in there. Thank you again, Dr. Miller, for being here. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. And we'll meet you back here next week on the Beef Podcast presented by Wisenetics. And this is Brandy Buzzard saying, until next time.